Hello, this is Blake Graham, Double Diamond with American Longevity, and I'm excited to be here today with Dr. Joel Wallach of the Dead Doctors Don't Lie fame. We'd like to speak with Dr. Wallach today about some demographics that sometimes don't realize they need the 90 essential nutrients, specifically about children, about women, and about athletes. Good morning, Dr. Wallach.
Morning, Blake. It's always great to share some time with you. And I'd like to start with kids. They're my favorite people. I have 4 kids of my own and 7 grandkids. And one of the things I really got started with in research was looking at the causes of birth defects in kids because of deficiencies in parents. 98% of the birth defects that are thought to be genetic in human beings, we actually got rid of in animals 50, 60, 70, 100 years ago just by supplementing properly to animals, because we don't have the ability to care for a baby animal that's born with the birth defect. A lamb is worth $2 when it's born, and if it has spina bifida or some kind of hernia, it's just not worth it. And so the doctor uses the old ball peen treatment, or the veterinarian would use the ball peen treatment, or the farmer would use the ball peen hammer treatment right on the head, throw a little body in the ditch, and that was the end of it. It just wasn't worth 50 cents to treat them. And we learned that for 10 cents worth of nutrients during the pregnancy, you can prevent spina bifida, you can prevent the herniations and so forth. And it always intrigued me that we did that sort of thing for animals, and nobody was really paying attention to how to prevent birth defects in people. When we look at the birth defects, things like muscular dystrophy, cystic fibrosis, neural tube defects like spina bifida, hydroencephalocele, where the brain naturally comes out of the skull. There's not much skull there, and the brain is on the outside of the skull when the baby's born. Heart defects of all kinds, kidney defects, urinary defects in kids, liver defects, biochemical defects, things like gout and PKU. These are all caused by nutritional deficiencies in the mother in the early stages of the formation of the embryo. And so one of the things I spent a lot of time with was learning about preconception nutrition. If a woman wants to have babies, they need to really be supplementing 3 to 6 months before pregnancy, before conception. We do this in animals. Any farmer, even with a 4th grade education, if he's going to buy a $1 million mare and look to have a lot of nice healthy colts, he better be feeding her real well and supplementing her real well before you pay the $50,000 stud fee, because there's always a risk that there'll be a birth defect. But if you supplement that mare with all the known essential nutrients in optimal amounts, you're guaranteed not to have any birth defects. And we should be doing the same thing with human beings instead of paying tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, or millions of dollars to deal with a baby that's born with some horrible, irreversible birth defect. And so that's always my goal. You get young families started, there's no better gift than you can give them than the assurance of a healthy baby. And so you do that by giving them the gift of nutrition, and you give them a complete set of all the known essential nutrients. And it's always a miracle to me to see babies born and all their fingers and toes and eyes and everything is in good shape. And it's simply because mama was doing the right thing. We have a lot of infertility today. Sperm count is dropping in men, and women have a hard time carrying pregnancies. A lot of times they'll get pregnant but have a miscarriage. It's a big business with in vitro fertilization. This is all unnecessary. Just simply supplementing properly will solve 98, maybe 100% of these infertility problems. Now, once the baby's born, a lot of people will ask me, well, how old does my baby have to be before I can start supplementing them with nutrients? Well, the moment that baby's born, when they're spanking them, you can start giving them the 90 essential nutrients, because developing babies need more nutrition per pound of body weight than an adult who's in a maintenance mode, because they're developing and they're almost doubling in the number of cells they have. Their brain is beginning to function. Their organs are functioning on their own for the first time after birth. So they need an enormous amount of nutrition. And one of the sad things is the American College of Pediatricians were in charge of the formulations of infant formulas. And they're very limited. They have less than 12 minerals. We know we need somewhere around 60. So right away, the baby's starting out with a deficit because they're not going to get anything else but that formula for the first 6 months of their life. And so you're starting them out short on at least 45 minerals, maybe more, depending on the formula you use. And so there's all these problems developing. The formulas do not closely approximate human breast milk. We know that babies are far more intelligent, their IQ is much higher just by giving them human breast milk as opposed to canned formulas. We know that babies will actually have much fewer infections and earaches and throat infections if they use breast milk instead of canned formulas. So human breast milk is always the best thing for babies. Now, once the baby's growing up, you need to increase their supplement program based on their body weight. We do this in animals. It's not thought much of for human beings, but I like to use the same techniques. You supplement vitamins and minerals and trace minerals, amino acids and fatty acids to a person regardless of their age. You do it based on their body weight. And you find that these kids are stronger, healthier, They're in the upper percentile of height and growth, and IQ is much higher. They're rarely sick. When they do get a cold, it's only for 3 days instead of 6 months. They're much happier. They sleep well. They're not up all night making everybody miserable. 11 million American kids under the age of 12 are on Ritalin for ADD and ADHD. Totally preventable, totally reversible, with little simple dietary adjustments and avoiding sugar and then supplementing properly. This is a disease that's totally preventable and totally reversible.
Well, Dr. Wallach, you mentioned several things there that I'd like to talk with you a little bit more in depth about. While we're on it with ADD and ADHD, you mentioned 11 million children on Ritalin today. Are there any risks associated with that?
Well, the first thing you have to appreciate, Blake, is that Ritalin is a narcotic. It's a prescription drug, and eventually the kid's going to have to get off of it. But they've already been addicted to taking a drug to control their behavior. There's an emotional addiction as well as an actual biochemical addiction. It's a narcotic. And anytime a doctor prescribes a narcotic for a kid that's 3 years old, 5 years old, 7 years old, 8 years old, 10 years old, 16-year-old, you're in trouble right out of the get-go. Because these are just simple little problems that do not need narcotic drugs. It's unfortunate that these kids are very disruptive in class sometimes or in families, and the family and the teachers are hoping and praying for a one-shot, one-pill answer to calm them down so they can get on with the rest of the day's business. And it's a very easy trap to fall into. But then when that kid gets to be 20 years old and finally comes off of Ritalin, they have a whole life they have to readjust because they've been depending on that drug to control their behavior. And now they're out in the real world without that crutch, and these are kids that get into real trouble. Ones are on Ritalin, often tend to smoke, they do drugs, they do alcohol, looking for other supports for their behavioral problems. They haven't really dealt with the basic root cause, and this can be extremely disruptive in their life. They have a hard time keeping jobs, personal relationships, marriages, parenting. They just don't do a very good job when they've been on Ritalin as a kid.
I had a brother, actually a few of my brothers, that were on Ritalin growing up, and it seemed that it really affected their metabolism. Have you noticed anything with that, with Ritalin?
Well, again, anytime you have a narcotic, it does change the metabolism because it does affect the nerves, the central nervous system, which then directly and indirectly affects the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland, which affects all the glands. And so metabolism does become affected when people are on any prescription drug. Ask any adult who's been on a prescription drug. They gain weight, they're fidgety, jittery. Sometimes they can be somnolent. They sleep all the time. They just can't get going. And sometimes you get constipated, sometimes you get diarrhea, sometimes you get irregular heartbeats. There's all kinds of things that happen to people. And before I would let a doctor prescribe Ritalin for my kid or grandkid, I would suggest that people look at the PDR, the physician's desk reference, and look at all the short-term and long-term side effects of Ritalin or any other drug that a doctor might put a kid on, when really, in most cases, 98% of the time, the kid really doesn't need the drug.
When you talk about Ritalin and ADHD, you're speaking about this not only as from your experience as a physician, but also as a father as well.
Yes. Blake, I was a widower, had 4 kids I had to deal with, was in school full-time, working full-time, and had to care for all the needs of these 4 kids, the youngest of whom at that time was about a year and a half old. When that child got to be 3 years old, it was very disruptive, had ADHD, hyperactivity. They actually called it hyperactivity in those days. There was no ADD or ADHD at that time. They just had what they call learning disabilities and hyperactivity. I learned very quickly that what I fed the child affected their behavior. And it was actually my youngest boy, and it affected his behavior. And just by a trial and error, I learned that keeping him away from sugar, cereals, from fruit and fruit juices, from donuts and cookies and cakes and pies and barbecue sauce, things that had sugar in them, the behavior was very, very good. But when they took in sugar, this little guy, he was just very, very disruptive. So then I began to add the supplements to the program. But this little guy who was disruptive, had really severe learning disabilities. When he was 6 years old, he couldn't even print his own name, couldn't count to 10. At 6 years old, couldn't count to 10. And it was in there, he just couldn't get it out. Once I got him off of sugar and supplemented him properly, he became very, very interested in learning, and it was always in there, and just very quickly he could read and count to 10, print his own name, and went on and has since graduated college and done extremely well.
Now, I know there's a study out there. In fact, I was doing some research recently on ADD and ADHD, and there's a study that a lot of people quote that says that they know now that it's not sugar-related. But when you look at the study, it actually proves that, not that sugar doesn't cause it, but that when you take kids off sugar, that it's not eliminated. In other words, kind of the analogy is, if you run over a nail with your car, it punctures a hole in the tire, you take that nail out and the hole's still there. Doesn't that seem like kind of a leap of logic to you?
Well, the mistakes that are made in these studies on sugar and hyperactivity and learning disabilities, unfortunately, Blake, are set up by pharmaceutical companies who want to sell their drugs. And the worst of the worst studies are ones where they take normal kids who are not affected by sugar for whatever reason. They're supplementing properly, they're getting enough nutrition, they were breastfed, and sugar really doesn't bother them. And they take 50 of these kids and they give them sugar and nothing happens. They say, well, there you go. And so what they need to do is take kids who have sensitivities to sugar, who do have ADD, ADHD, get them off of sugar for a month, clean them up, and show how good they can be and how well they study and so forth. Then put them back on sugar. And you'll see a huge difference. Boy, they go off the roof. They're bouncing around the walls like Gerald McBoing Boing. They can't sit still. Their ability to learn and retain things drops to zero. And that's what you need to do to make a successful experiment. Now, one of the things that used to happen when I practiced in Portland, Oregon, this is just when parents were beginning to feel the pressure of teachers. Teachers who had these disruptive kids in school were learning about Ritalin at that time, back in the late 70s and early 80s. And teachers would say, look, you got to get this kid on Ritalin. And the parent would say, well, no, I'm not going to do that. My kid's okay. My kid's normal when they leave the house in the morning. I know what you're doing to my kid, but he's normal when he leaves the house. My kid doesn't have hyperactivity. And the teacher then would go to either the city or the county or the state child protective services and demand that the kid get put on Ritalin, and they'd have to go to court. And so the parents were always coming to me to show that the kid was normal. And what I learned, you'll find in the book, Rare Earths Forbidden Cures, in chapters 4, 5, and 6, it totally deals with this and actually shows parents how to diagnose ADD and ADHD themselves, hyperactivity and learning disabilities. You can do this very easily, and the book teaches you how to do that. Now, I'll come back and give a short version on how to do it. But to make a long story short, I was able to prove to judges that this was something. The kid was normal when he left the home, had slept for 8 hours, and had been fasting since dinner the night before. Woke up normal, had normal behavior, kissed mom and dad, hugged him, was just a nice little kid. But he had sugar frosted flakes for breakfast. Maybe even had a little bit of Coca-Cola for breakfast. Maybe had apple juice for breakfast. Maybe had a Pop-Tart or a jelly donut for breakfast. And then went to school. Well, about 10 o'clock, that kid's going to be bouncing off the wall, can't sit still, can't retain anything they've read, and is very disruptive, sometimes very aggressive and mean. And this is what the teacher is seeing at 10 o'clock. And so the short version of how to determine this yourself, if a doctor says, look, your kid's got learning disabilities or hyperactivity, ADD, ADHD, whatever it might be, the thing you can do is when the child wakes up in the morning, have them draw their favorite picture. And I like animals. Kids like animals, and they draw pretty good pictures of animals. And then you give them their typical breakfast. Sugar Frosted Flakes, Captain Crunch, Cocoa Puffs. You give them whatever they might have to drink, which might be apple juice or Tang. You don't see much Tang anymore, but Tang, things like that. Lots of sugar in it, donuts, Pop-Tarts, waffles with syrup on it. And then an hour later, ask them to draw that same animal, but don't leave the picture in front of them. Oh, you drew a real nice panda before. Why don't you draw me a panda again? But hide the first picture. And you'll notice a huge difference between the first panda and the second one. The second one probably won't even look remotely like it. It might even look like a computer or a car or something. Totally disorientated from what the original picture they look from. And the one I like that I use in the book, Rare Earths Forbidden Cures, the child was 6 years old, in fact was my own child, drew a giraffe, beautiful giraffe, long neck, nice little square spots all over the giraffe, long legs. No doubt about it, anybody could recognize the 6-year-old's drawing of a giraffe. Hour and a half later, after having sugar frosted flakes for breakfast and apple juice, said, okay, draw me a giraffe again. Now it looked like a shmoo. I don't know if you're old enough to remember what a shmoo looked like, but it was a little character in the Little Abner cartoon thing. It looked like a bowling pin. It was a little animal that looked like a bowling pin, a little creature that looked like a bowling pin. And the spots were now just taking the pen in his hand and stabbing spots. The spots were just little dots that he stabbed all over this shmoo or bowling pin looking animal compared to the giraffe an hour and a half earlier. Same kid, just an hour and a half after consuming sugar for breakfast. Very, very dramatic for the parent to see this, for the judge to see this, and very, very dramatic for the child to see this. Say, this is what happened to you when you ate sugar. Sugar is bad for you. Sugar causes this problem. Sugar causes you to be disruptive. Your friends don't like it when you're that way. Your teacher gets angry with you. You get bad grades. You're going to get punished when you're disruptive. And so if you avoid sugar, you're going to be like this first picture. You're going to be doing things right. And I like to walk into some of these fast food restaurants, like Denny's, for instance, or grocery stores during holidays like Thanksgiving or Halloween. And you see all these drawings, or you could even go into schools, and I like to go to the kindergarten classes where they have all these drawings taped on the wall. And whether it's a turkey or pilgrims or pumpkins or Easter eggs or whatever it might be, you'll find that I can pick out the kids with ADD, ADHD just from looking at their drawings. The ones who don't have ADD or ADHD, they're very nice as far as their color choices, very good color choices. They stay in the lines on their coloring projects. The ones who have ADD or ADHD, they'll pick a very dark color, usually red, purple, black, brown, dark blue, dark green, and they just scribble all over the place. The color choices have no relationship to what the picture is, like a dark purple pumpkin, and the kid just scribbles all over the page with no attempt to stay in the lines. They take that same child the next day, keep him off his sugar, and give him the same choices of colors in the same picture, and it'll be totally different. They'll stay in the lines, they'll have the right choices, they'll pick orange for the pumpkin, and they'll make attempts to stay in the lines as opposed to the day before where they had sugar for breakfast, and they took a dark color and scribbled all over the page. And these are simple little diagnostic things that parents can do, and I showed these things before and afters very clearly in the book, Rare Earths Have Been Cures, chapters 4, 5, and 6. I saw so many of these kids. I literally saw thousands of them over the years that I practiced in Portland, Oregon, because I got a reputation that I could solve their problems. And people would send them to me from Canada, from Mexico, from the eastern and central part of the United States. They all came to my little clinic in Portland, Oregon, because I got well known for solving their problems. But it's very simple. No sugar, natural or processed. There's no good sugar for these kids. And then you supplement them with all the known essential nutrients. I like to give them enzymes. I like to give them some antioxidants, which you can find like in grapeseed extracts or green tea, decaffeinated green tea. You don't want to give them caffeine. And you give them all the known essential nutrients plus the antioxidants, digestive enzymes, and they do extremely well. These kids go on and have normal lives. Their IQs go up. They are very good learners. They're very good citizens, not disruptive anymore, very functional both in the family, at class, and at work.
So is the rise in the ADD and ADHD and even the school violence that we see, is that then linked to the increased availability of sugars in our schools, vending machines starting to carry pop and snack foods? In addition, you noticed recently that California has made a move to take some of that sugar back out of the school.
Well, you're hitting the nail right on the head, Blake. 100 years ago, according to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Americans were eating half a pound of sugar per person per year. A half a pound per person per year. Today, 100 years later, according to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Americans are eating 157 pounds of sugar per person per year, which is almost a half a pound a day. And I don't eat much sugar, and so somebody out there is eating 314 to keep the average 157. Basically, many of these kids, their whole diet, from the moment they wake up until the moment they go to sleep, is sugar sources. All prepared foods. Both parents are working. They have hectic schedules. They got to get out the door, get the kid out to school. And so many of their meals are prepared meals, and unfortunately they're loaded with sugar. And so we have this huge problem. And the way to beat this is to, as early as possible, teach the child how to prepare their own food. As early as possible. I mean, I'm talking 4, 5, 6 years old. I already knew how to cook and could cook and do my own dishes and stuff when I was just 4, 5, 6 years old. And so we have to do this more and more and more. And the kids cannot be dependent on the parents for these simple things because the parent's not there all the time. The parents have to leave at 6 in the morning to be at work at 8, and the kid might even be a latchkey kid leaving after the parents leave and getting home long before the parents get home. And so there has to be all the sugar removed out of the house. There can't be any sugar in the house. The parents have to eat the same way. The child has to be educated that sugar is bad for them. And if you want snacks, they can eat handfuls of mixed salted nuts. They can have sugar-free whey shakes and whey puddings and things. And this is the way to do it. They need to be taught how to eat steamed and cooked vegetables and salads. And you can have in the refrigerator both in the morning and at night. Hard-boiled eggs, already grilled or cooked chicken breast. Teach the child how to use microwaves. There's no danger of fire. And this is how you can teach them. My little grandkids are 4, 5, 6 years old, and they already know how to cook with microwaves. Very simple and no risk of fire.
What about the recent legislation in California? Can you mention that?
In California, just a couple of months ago, the governor signed a bill which kept schools from putting soft drink machines in the school. They could only sell water and fruit juices. I don't even like the fruit juices, too much sugar there. But it's a real good move to get rid of the soft drinks out of the school, because not only did they have sugar in them, but they also had caffeine in them. And that's a real bad combination, caffeine and sugar, for anybody, let alone kids. And I thought it was a really great move because somebody was thinking. The people who introduced that bill and made sure that it got passed were thinking the right direction. It's really a crime to sell sugar and prepared foods and candy bars and sugar snacks or even chips and things like that in schools as snacks for kids because it teaches them bad habits. It's certainly bad nutrition, and if they're deficient in nutrients, which most growing kids are, they're more prone to ADD, ADHD, violence. And if you look at all the kids who've done terrible things in schools around the country and around the world for that matter, in each case these kids had hyperactivity, ADHD, ADD. In most cases, 99% of the time, they were on Ritalin, Prozac combinations, and you just knew that down the line something bad was going to happen because they were kids that would have rage as a response to something they didn't like, and they were not taught properly in the families. May have been a disjointed family, may have been a divorce in there, or maybe both parents were working and the kid really didn't have any supervision growing up. And then you add the sugar problem on top of it. A lot of these kids will do some terrible things. The parents won't let them have the car keys. The kid marches into the bedroom, comes out with an aluminum baseball bat and kills both their parents. Or they don't like a rebuff at school from a student, boy or girl. They go home, pick up a gun, come back and shoot it up the school. And this has to do with all the sugar, nutrient deficiencies. And this is why I don't see much of this in Europe and Asia. When you go to a school, and I did, when I went to China with my wife, and we went back to some of her preschools and grade schools and high schools, and you walk up and down the halls, and I was looking for soft drink machines and candy machines. There were none. There were none. The parents sent all the snacks with the kids, and they did. They had an apple, or they had some nuts, or they may have had a rice ball or something like that, or maybe some vegetables, cooked vegetables, maybe some meat, chicken or fish or beef or pork with some rice for a snack. And they had their little bags, and they'd have their snacks and their lunches and everything in there. But there was no sugar in these kids' lives. And everybody's calm. You never hear of anybody in China causing violence in their schools. You never hear of anybody in Russia causing violence in the schools. You never hear of anybody in England where kids are disruptive in the schools because they don't sell sugar in the schools. They don't give them sugar for their meals or snacks. We give Kool-Aid for snacks, and we wonder why kids get nuts. Well, it's just another source of sugar.
If we could go back to what we do to repair the hole after we've taken the nail out of the flat tire. In other words, in addition to eliminating the sugar, you talk about you've mentioned antioxidants, you've mentioned making sure you're getting enzymes, you've mentioned some things like decaffeinated green tea and grapeseed extract. Now, I've heard you on another cassette that you have called God's Recipe talk about some trace minerals in addition that you need to make sure that you're really looking for. I think lithium, chromium, vanadium. Could you just tell us a little bit about that?
Well, absolutely, Blake. Kids, again, as I said earlier, growing kids need more nutrients per pound of body weight than an adult who's in a maintenance mode. They need all the essential nutrients, all the minerals, all the vitamins, all the amino acids, all the fatty acids. But when they have behavioral problems, ADD, ADHD, Tourette syndrome, anger, rage, anxiety attacks, panic attacks, depression, manic depression, bipolar disease, in addition to all the known essential nutrients, they need to focus on and have extra of certain nutrients. And these include lithium, chromium, vanadium, zinc. These are just great for kids. And if you give them extra of those, you'll find that these kids will do extremely well, and the problems just go away. I've seen it in my personal life with my own son who had really extreme disruptive ADD, ADHD, had both of them. And I've seen this literally thousands of times in families who I've worked with over the years who've come to me with problem children. It's just totally easy to reverse by supplementing them properly and getting them off of sugar. And again, the reports that say sugar has nothing to do with ADD or ADHD or hyperactivity are because they take kids who have no problems, they give them some sugar, and they say, look, it doesn't cause any problems. Well, these are kids who are either eating properly, supplementing properly, or who just haven't been depleted yet, and sugar doesn't seem to cause a problem. What they need to do is take kids who have a problem, clean them up real good, supplement them properly, get all the sugar out of their life, get them going to where they're really good citizens, I like to call it, where they have no ADD, no ADHD, no disruptive behaviors, family's going good, school's going good. Then you put them back on sugar and take away the supplements. Then you're going to see them go off the roof. You're going to see them really be hyperactive, maybe even worse than they were before. Because once they've been cleaned up and they have really no contact with sugar for the last month, you're going to see a dramatic difference when you put them back on sugar. And nobody's ever done that. I've done it in small groups, one kid here, 2 kids there. But as far as a study that is going to find its way to a medical journal where you're doing it in 100 kids, nobody's done that yet, because the people who do studies on sugar and behavior, they're the ones that are supported financially by the drug companies that make Ritalin and Prozac. And so they really don't want to show that kids can get better by getting them off of sugar. What they want to do is say, look, they really need Ritalin. And so you can't depend on those types of studies, because they're not designed to show the truth. They're designed to sell the drugs. And, parents can do this on their own. Again, I'd urge them to get the book, Rare Earths Been Cures, look in chapters 4, 5, and 6. Get a hold of the audio cassette tape, God's Recipe. It's a great little tape. It's actually a radio interview combined with some teaching on that tape, and it's really very well done, I think, and people who have problematic children pick up the right idea from that tape.
Well, thank you, Dr. Wallach. Now, I know in addition we have a lot of listeners here who say, well, my children doesn't have ADD and ADHD. Basically, I've got healthy kids. Now, don't healthy kids, isn't there a need for them to be on all the 90 essential nutrients as well? I know recently that we're seeing an increase of like schoolyard injuries, children that fall off a swing and break a leg. That it seems like that's going up as well.
Well, again, that goes to the basic tenet, Blake, that all children from the moment they're conceived, all through pregnancy, from the moment they're born, require all the known essential nutrients. And if you don't consciously give your child, supplement them with all the known essential nutrients, you're doomed to have a problem in that child. It's going to happen, because our food plants can manufacture vitamins and amino acids and fatty acids, but plants cannot manufacture minerals. So the deficit will almost always first show up as a mineral deficiency. Easy fractures, stunted growth, behavioral problems, asthma, heart attacks, sudden death, aneurysms, vision problems, dental problems. These kids will get diabetes. In fact, the age group in America now that has the fastest increase and largest increase in the number of diagnoses of adult onset type 2 diabetes, which historically was only diagnosed in people over the age of 50, the biggest group that is now showing more and more diagnoses of adult onset type 2 diabetes are kids under the age of 12, because of the sugar load they're taking in, and there's not enough of the chromium and vanadium in their food. So you have to supplement. Again, my kids and grandkids, I supplemented them once I learned this problem. I started supplementing them whether they need it or not. And all my kids and grandkids are very healthy. They don't have any problems. I think I probably only got the 4 kids and the only 7 grandkids on the planet that don't have problems because they're supplemented heavily. We're anti-sugar in the Wallach family. As a result, we're reaping the benefits of doing it right. And it's kind of a short-term benefit to give kids packaged foods with all the sugar in it, to save a little time here and a little time there to get out the door, to get to work. But over the long haul, that child will have problems as they get older. And it's really sad. I was doing a radio interview today, and a guy called in and said he had a 16-year-old daughter who just was constantly getting sick, had all these problems, went to doctor after doctor after doctor, and they couldn't figure out what was wrong with her. They just gave her cortisone. Just for no reason. I mean, what justification could you give a 16-year-old girl cortisone because they constantly had sore throats and earaches and all this sort of stuff? And so the doctor just gave up and said, here, take this. I don't know what else to do. One nice thing was, of course, the doctors eliminated sinister things like cancer and MS and all this kind of stuff. So you know it's not something of that nature. And basically when they eliminate all the sinister things, it's like the old Sherlock Holmes when Dr. Watson would say, well, Holmes, how did you know that? How did you know that this was the problem when Scotland Yard and all the best criminal minds couldn't figure it out? And Holmes will say, well, when you eliminate the impossible, whatever's left, no matter how improbable, must be the truth. And same thing here. When they eliminate cancer and they eliminate arthritis and multiple sclerosis, it's got to be a nutritional deficiency because there's nothing left. And so just by giving this young girl all the nutrients. Oh, by the way, one other thing. She was 16 years old. She was an athlete, very active in athletics. So she was sweating out nutrients. And family was feeding her right. She was eating well. Like father kept saying she's eating well, but wasn't supplemented. So not only was she growing and going through puberty, all of which needs more nutrients, but also she was an athlete and sweating out nutrients. So she was losing them, requiring more as she grew and went through puberty. And so just giving her supplements, taking her off of sugar, suddenly this young girl is going to do extremely well. And, of course, the doctors will say, oh, see, it was cortisone.
Well, what's wrong with cortisone?
First of all, cortisone is an anti-inflammatory steroid. It does all kinds of interesting things. It's anti-inflammatory. It actually depresses the immune system as part of the chemotherapy for cancer, and also for transplants. When you get a transplant, they'll give you prednisone or cortisone to keep your body from rejecting the transplant. And it has some purposes there. But when it comes to just, we don't know what else to do, take prednisone or cortisone, there's a huge problem here because side effects of prednisone and cortisone are diabetes, arthritis, osteoporosis. From the moment you take your first dose of prednisone and cortisone, it starts accelerating the loss of minerals out of your body. And if you're already deficient in certain minerals, you're going to head in the direction of those mineral deficiency diseases, such as diabetes, which is a deficiency of chromium and vanadium. You're going to head in the direction of arthritis, osteoporosis, chronic back problems, high blood pressure, all these things. Macular degeneration is just an endless parade of diseases, as many as 600 different diseases that are due to mineral deficiencies. And when you take prednisone and cortisone, you're marching towards getting one or more of those.
I know you talked about convenience, that a lot of families now kind of, as they don't spend as much time cooking like they used to, they're looking kind of for some food that's easy to prepare, and unfortunately a lot of those have the sugar. But I know recently there have been more and more people recommending some of the kind of convenient foods that are like protein shakes, and sometimes I've even seen fruits and vegetable extracts that don't have all the sugar in them. I think they've taken out the water, but they have all the catechins, the phytonutrients in them as well. What's your feeling about these kind of products?
Well, I think from the standpoint, especially kids that are disruptive, they don't like to sit there for a half-hour dinner and eat their vegetables, right? And sugar from a lot of fruit would throw fire and gasoline together, so to speak, and so you're going to cause more disruption by giving them fruit and fruit juices. And so there are great products out there that have fruit and vegetable extracts where the sugar's been removed. And, of course, we like those. We actually suggest that people take them. And, of course, the sugarless whey shakes. Again, handfuls of mixed salted nuts. These are all things that are great foods, good foods, and they're sugar-free. Now, I can tell you that microwaves are the greatest things for kids who are kind of left to their own devices for cooking because they can make herbal teas, which have no caffeine in them. They can actually cook eggs. They can whip up their eggs like you'd be whipping up eggs to scramble them. You can make omelets and things like that, put them in the microwave. Works like a charm. You can cook hamburger patties in microwaves. You can cook chicken in microwaves. You can heat up baked potatoes with butter on it in microwaves. There's all kinds of things that a 6-year-old kid can do, or maybe a latchkey kid who comes home. They're 8, 10, 12, 15 years old, and they're coming home by themselves a couple hours early. What do they do for a snack? They can come home, put a hamburger patty and a baked potato with some butter on it in the microwave, and really have a great meal without the danger of fire, without natural gas and electric stoves where you can put your hand on it and burn yourself. It's really a very, very useful tool when you have kids, are those microwaves. And they're sound waves. There's no radiation, so there's no danger to the kid from radiation. A lot of people were worried about radiation, but there's no radiation in a microwave. And I have 6 of them. I have microwaves everywhere. They're so convenient. When my herbal tea cools down, I don't want to march to the other end of the house to put my herbal tea in the microwave, so I have them all over the house. And they're cheap, they're convenient, they're safe, and a little kid, all they have to do is know how to count to 10, and they know how to work those little digital gauges on there, and it makes them independent. They like being able to do that. And you teach them, you get a little footstool and teach them how to wash dishes and things. Kids just love growing up and being big and so forth. So it's not something you have to force them to do. If you give them all the tools and they feel good when they do it, they eat properly, staying away from sugar, they'll do it.
Now, another one of the raw nutrients, the building blocks that people need are the essential fatty acids. I know that there's a lot of research. I actually saw a magazine article that was claiming that children that have adequate amounts of essential fatty acids are up to 10 IQ points higher. And I know that you've talked about that in conjunction with things like asthma as well. Can you spend just a few moments and review essential fatty acids and what children need as far as kind of a daily requirement?
Okay, well, as the name implies, Blake, essential fatty acids are essential. They're essential for a variety of reasons, a multitude of reasons, and kids need them from the moment they're conceived. And if they don't have enough essential fatty acids, you're too young to remember, but Jackie Kennedy's first child didn't make it. Died of immature lungs, was born a little early, premature birth. But the reason the child was having problems with the lungs was he didn't have enough essential fatty acids during the pregnancy to make the lungs healthy and work properly. Essential fatty acids are also required for the immune system. Essential fatty acids are also required to help by maintaining blood sugar properly. It also is part of the needs that a child has to prevent the onset of asthma. And so essential fatty acids are so important for kids. when kids get adequate amounts of essential fatty acids, you're eliminating probably 15 or 20 diseases that they might get that they wouldn't get if you supplemented them properly with essential fatty acids. The essential fatty acids include omega-3s, 6s, and 9s, and there's all kinds of raw materials that come from these omega-3s, 6s, and 9s. These include prostaglandins, which are little short-lived hormones. They only live for 30 seconds, 60 seconds, but they're produced all over the body. Just about every cell in the body produces prostaglandins, and they require the essential fatty acids to do that. And obviously you can tell what part of the body they first were discovered in the prostate, so they're called prostaglandins. And they have a function. And your body's just producing them like a machine gun because they only have a very short life. But if you're deficient in the essential fatty acids, which is a raw material to make prostaglandins, you'll develop asthma. Your immune system won't work well. You'll be sick all the time. And just by supplementing properly with the essential fatty acids, a whole litany of problems goes away almost overnight. And so kids really need a lot of these things. Now, one of the things they learned about kids and essential fatty acids, Blake, was when kids are born preemie, they only weigh 1.5 pounds when they're born, they did things special for them. And they would give them, more supplementation. They probably gave them 60 nutrients, where the average formula for a normal term 9-month-old baby when it's born, they might get in their formula, the canned formula that they buy in the store, they might get 10 or 12 minerals, 10 or 12 vitamins, and that's about it. The rest of it's corn syrup and sugar, fructose from apples or corn or something like that as energy sources. And there weren't any essential fatty acids added to it. As a result, preemies, they got all this nutrition, including essential fatty acids because of their lung needs. They had IQs. Preemies have an IQ that's 10 to 15 times higher than a full-term baby that's born after 9 months of pregnancy because of all these nutrients that were given the babies, especially the essential fatty acids. And so now they're debating whether or not they should be adding essential fatty acids to the canned formulas for full-term babies. And those will go on for years, just like the folic acid thing went on for years. When I was in school, in 1958, when I was a freshman in ag school, University of Missouri, in agricultural biochemistry, the first thing we were taught was you can actually prevent spina bifida by putting folic acid in a ration for animals. This was 1958. And only just recently were makers of bread products required to put folic acid in like pasta and breads and cookies and things like that, because they debated it for years. So many doctors felt that it was dangerous to put folic acid in foodstuffs as a supplement in the food. Well, gosh, if you eat one little flower on a broccoli head, one of these little flowers are the size of the head of a pin, you're going to get more folic acid than you would in any supplement on the market. And yet doctors were afraid to allow people to put folic acid in bread. And as a result, we've had literally millions of babies born with neural tube defects, things like cleft palate, cleft lip, spina bifida, because doctors refuse to recognize the importance of these nutrients in our foods.
Well, you talked a little bit about making sure you get adequate amounts of essential fatty acids in your diet. How much is an adequate amount? How many milligrams or grams are we talking of? And is there anything to look for when you're looking for products to make sure you've got high-quality products?
Well, the basic requirement for essential fatty acids is 3% of our calorie intake. And if you look at the labels on high-quality supplement programs, you'll see when they list percentages, they'll always say as a percentage of a 2,000-calorie diet or a 1,000-calorie diet. And so you're always looking at calories when you determine these things. And so it's 3% of your total calories should be the essential fatty acids, and that kind of gives you some clue of how this works. The ones that we use, of course, are ones that have had nitrogen pumped into the capsules before they're sealed, so which removes almost all of the oxygen that's in there, reduces the oxidation rate, and it makes the essential fatty acids much more stable. Just because they're essential fatty acids doesn't mean that they're not prone to or can be victimized by some of the oxidative processes that go on with any oils and fats, whether they're essential or not. And so you have to protect them. You have to protect them because essential fatty acids can be very dangerous if they've oxidized and become trans fatty acids. And so you really have to watch this very carefully. And so we make sure that we actually use the soft gel capsules that are actually pumped full of nitrogen before the essential fatty acids put in. It's topped off with nitrogen again before they're sealed, which removes most of the oxygen that's in there, and it either totally retards or extremely slows down the oxidative process. So it keeps these things fresh and safe.
All right. For a small child, then, when you're talking about 3% of the caloric intake, do you have kind of an estimate as far as how many milligrams or grams that would be?
Well, for a newborn baby, I like to have them take in maybe 100 milligrams 3 or 4 times a day. And so you can actually open up a 1,000 milligram capsule and put a couple of drops in each serving of their formula. And you'll notice a huge difference. These kids get really bright-eyed, their hair gets shiny, their skin gets really soft, they don't have any dry, flaky skin anywhere. You can always tell a kid that has adequate essential fatty acids. They're just totally different. They don't have cracked cuticles when they're 4, 5, 6 years of age. If you look at little kids that have cracked cuticles when they're 4, 5, 6 years of age, you know that they're living on apple juice, grape juice. You know they're living on soft drinks. You know that they're eating nothing but prepared high carbohydrate foods, have very little in the way of essential fatty acids, which kids primarily are going to get naturally in fish if they eat like roasted, baked, stewed, poached, grilled fish. Not fried, but it has to be cooked in any other way other than fried. And the essential fatty acids you can actually get from fish is really great, but it's not convenient. A lot of people don't like fish. It smells up the kitchen. Kids may not like it if they're not introduced to it early on in life. And so I like to supplement them. That way you're guaranteeing they're going to get these things. And, of course, you'll reduce the risk of asthma. You'll reduce the risk of sudden death. It's unfortunate. A lot of kids, especially when they get into athletics, even the Pee Wee leagues when they're 6 years old, riding their tricycles, they can fall over dead if they're deficient in essential fatty acids because they can get thrombosis and blood clots even at that young age. It's not an age-related thing. You get sticky platelets and red blood cells because you're deficient in the essential fatty acids. And this affects people of all ages, even little kids.
Now, I travel a lot, and I hear a lot of people mention that if you're sitting in one location for a long time, one position, that you have this risk of thrombosis. Are essential fatty acids effective in helping protect against this as well?
Absolutely, Blake. Of course, as much as I travel, and you're getting up there, you're getting close to my schedule, I probably travel close to 1 million miles a year. And I take 10 grams. I take 10 grams of essential fatty acids a day as a supplement. Plus, I try to eat fish a couple of times a week. I try to eat chicken skin a couple of times a week. Again, watching that it's not fried, but grilled, baked, stewed, poached, made into soup is okay. And I really try to flood myself with the essential fatty acids. I probably go for 10% of my calories as essential fatty acids because I am on planes for many, many long trips, 12, 15, 20 hours. And I will also get up every half hour, every hour, and walk around the plane. I walk around the plane a lot, stand at the exits and do exercises, squat down, move around. I drink plenty of water. I like to use the sports tech when I'm on airplanes, put an ounce. I like to use the sweat replacer. When I'm on trips, I'll put an ounce of our sweat replacer concentrate into the water when I'm on trips, so I'm getting a lot of electrolytes. You have to drink plenty of water, and it usually keeps my jet lag down. And, of course, you're going to see more and more airplanes having instructions on how to exercise during long flights because of the thrombosis risk. Another way, of course, you can reduce that risk significantly is by supplementing properly with the essential fatty acids and reducing the stickiness of your platelets and red blood cells.
All right. Now, you mentioned some fluid replacer that it also replaces all the trace minerals as well. A lot of people, a lot of athletes, that's a challenge for them because as they perspire, they lose a lot of those minerals. And is it true that athletes, as a result, don't tend to be as healthy long-term as the average American?
Well, Blake, the myth is that exercise is good for you. In fact, exercise without supplementation to replace everything you're sweating out is suicide. You actually could cut your lifespan in half by exercising and sweating, or sweating at work without replacing the nutrients you're sweating out. And we know that just water alone won't do it because there's not much in the way of essential nutrients in water. We know that soft drinks won't do it. We know that iced tea and hot tea and coffee won't do it. We know that the average commercial sports drink on the market won't do it because they're primarily electrolyte, sugar, and yellow or blue dye number 3, 5, or 8. Electrolytes are nothing but salt water, so you might get 2 or 3 minerals, and that's about it. And so the sports drinks are extremely limited. They're meant for a short-term benefit to keep people from getting weak as they lose salt when they're sweating during games. But over the long haul, these typical sports drinks in the market really aren't going to help an athlete. As you pointed out, the average athlete lives to be an average of 62 to 65. The average couch potato lives to be 75, simply because the couch potato doesn't sweat as much as the athlete. You do have to replace the nutrients they're sweating out. Of course, it could be any of them, but the primary ones I'm concerned about are the minerals. Because if you eat well, you might be able to get enough vitamins, you might be able to get enough essential fatty acids. You might be able to get enough amino acids, but it's almost impossible to get enough minerals, especially if you're working hard. And if you look at the top athletes, they don't do very well when it comes to longevity. People like Babe Ruth, Lou Gehrig, Red Grange, Jim Thorpe, some of the old-time athletes that people my age will remember. Sergei Grinkov, a great pairs figure skating. He and his wife were the darlings of the pairs figure skating world back in the 90s. He died at age 28 from a cardiomyopathy heart attack. And then Reggie Lewis, 27-year-old captain of the Boston Celtics, 4% body fat, as fit as a human being could be. Very highly paid athlete, died at 27 of a cardiomyopathy heart attack. And then more recently, you look at some of the top athletes. Sam Snead, great golfer, died at age 86 from a heart attack. Ted Williams, just one of the greatest baseball players that ever lived, died at age 84. And not too long after that, Johnny Unitas died at age 69 from a heart attack while he was on the treadmill in a rehab center. He'd had a quadruple bypass this spring, and 4 or 5 months later, he dies of a heart attack with all the cardiovascular surgeons standing around watching him. And that's because he's sweating out all these nutrients. And the doctors were skilled, I'm sure, at doing the mechanical part of the surgery, but they fell way short when it came to looking at the nutrient needs of a high-producing athlete. And, of course, FloJo, great woman athlete, she died in her sleep in her 30s. They have all kinds of speculation on why that was. No drugs involved. She just died in her sleep in her 30s. I think if I'd have done the autopsy, I'd have figured it out. I don't think they were looking for the right things. I think they focused on the drugs, and when there were no drugs there, they just said, well, she must have thrown up in her sleep. I mean, really insane stuff. And so we have to consider that the top athletes are the ones that die younger because they're sweating more, getting rid of more nutrients. And after Johnny Unitas, I have to throw in a couple more here, Blake, because the great athletes have been dying right, left, and center. Bullet Bob Hayes, a guy who won 2 gold medals in the Olympics, one in the 100-meter dash, also in the 440 relays, won gold medals there. He won 2 Super Bowl game rings with the Dallas Cowboys, and he died at 59. Then not too long after that, Iron Mike Webster. This guy was the center for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I don't know, I think he had 4 or 5 Super Bowl rings. This guy never missed a game in 17 years. He was their offensive center for 17 years. He was called Iron Mike because he just never missed a practice, never missed a game. And even when it was like 20 below zero, he wore short-sleeve shirts, and this guy was just a fit, I mean, really an athlete's athlete, and they called him Iron Mike. And he died at age 50 of a heart attack. And that's because they sweat out all their nutrients. If you don't replace them, you're going to get some horrible degenerative disease as well as die early. There's just no doubt about it.
Well, I know some people, to hear you talk, Doc, they would think that you don't like exercise, but I happen to know for a fact that you've been quite the athlete as well.
Well, let me start out by saying, Blake, that exercise without supplementation kills, okay? Exercise without replacing the minerals you're sweating out is a negative. You can literally cut your lifespan in half. You can literally set yourself up for all kinds of degenerative diseases that result from sweating out these nutrients. Yeah, I was an athlete. Played football in high school for 4 years. Was a middle linebacker on defense. 123 pounds. I was very aggressive. Never had any injuries because I supplemented even then. On offense, I was both the offensive center and pulling guard. That was back in the old single wing days. They didn't even have the T formation for football. So that kind of ages me a little bit. The first exciting thing we did, I think, was single wings. It was the first version of student body right and student body left. And, these big sweeps of 6 players going around one end, and the runner just had to fall in behind those 6 blockers. And so I was a pulling guard. I was very quick, but very small, only 123 pounds. But because I was quick, I was always able to outmaneuver the bigger guy on the defensive line who might have been 200 pounds or 220 pounds, even back in high school. And so I loved playing football, loved competing against the big guys. And then I wrestled for 4 years in high school at the 123-pound weight class. I was captain of the wrestling team. Wrestled for 2 years in college at the University of Missouri, lettered at the college level, but had to quit when I started veterinary school. It was just too much requirements for study. But I always enjoyed athletics, enjoyed the feeling of what exercise did for you. But I learned as a kid that there was no professional athletes ever lived to be 100. And so I was always looking for ways to supplement properly to not let exercise kill me.
Well, you mentioned that you were able to go through all that football and the wrestling with no injuries. Now, I know that a lot of people, even now, be them professional athletes or be they like weekend warriors or somebody that just goes to a gym, a lot of people are taking supplements to help, like protein supplements to help with muscle build. But isn't it just as important to take these minerals and the other supplements to help with prevent injuries with bones and joints and ligaments and tendons as well?
Blake, it's absolutely more important to supplement with the vitamins and minerals and trace minerals. It's more important to supplement with the essential fatty acids than it is to supplement with protein supplements. Usually when you're doing intense exercise, your body will break those protein supplements down into carbohydrates, and you use them mostly for energy. You're kind of wasting money at that point. And I like to focus in, if somebody's a real serious athlete, they're training hard, even peewee level athletes, when they're in the peewee leagues, 6 years old, they're playing soccer and hockey and now golf and tennis, track and gymnastics. These little gals, weigh 60 pounds, are doing gymnastics and really sweating it up. They need intense supplement programs. Otherwise, they're doomed to failure somewhere along the line. They're going to get some injury, just stepping off the curb, twisting their ankle when it really shouldn't happen. They should have the ligament and tendon strength. And you hear a lot about doctors saying, well, you can push a kid too hard, resulting in injuries. Well, if they're supplemented properly, they won't get injuries. Again, when I was a kid, I supplemented very heavily because I was trying to weight lift and get strength for football and wrestling. And there's a lot of players who are much bigger than me that did get injuries because they didn't supplement properly. They supplemented with jelly donuts, right, or soft drinks, and I never did. I just never liked sugar, never drank soft drinks, never. And as a result, by supplementing properly and avoiding the bad stuff, I was bulletproof as a kid and worked hard, trained hard. I was always the first one out in the field, in the court, in the mats, always the last one off. And when they wanted tackling drills, to train runners how to avoid tackles, I'd always be the first one to volunteer because I just loved tackling those big guys. And my goal was to knock them down and hurt them, and I did.
Well, if somebody is training, what kind of supplements do you recommend? I know we talked about minerals. I think you'd like to see lots of extra calcium, extra of the major minerals, as well as I've heard you talk about things like glucosamine, as well as gelatin. What kind of benefit can people expect from those kind of nutrients?
Blake, athletes that are working at an intense level, whether it's training or actually participating in an event, put tremendous pressure on their joints, cartilage, ligaments, tendons, connective tissues, muscles, bones, and just eating the 4 food groups isn't going to cut it. It's just like a car. Are you going to put the same type of oil in your everyday car going to and from work as you would, say, a Indianapolis 500 car? No. I mean, you need some intense oil and lubricants that will hold up under the heat and pressure of going 200 miles an hour for 500 miles as opposed to 5 minutes to the grocery store. And so the same thing is true for athletes. They put tremendous pressure on their joints and ligaments, tendons, connective tissue, bones, cartilage, muscles, and so they need a lot more nutrients than somebody who's just a person who's working on a computer, data entry person, or maybe a banker or bank teller who does not do those sort of things. And so they do need more. And even today, at my age, I like to be very intense when I come to supplementation. And so I probably, even though I only weigh about 175 pounds, I supplement at the rate of if I weighed 300 pounds. I supplement very intense, and as a result, I just don't get injuries. I don't get injuries even at my age. I don't have arthritis. I don't have osteoporosis. I have all my own teeth. Don't have blood pressure problems. Don't have sugar problems. Don't have asthma. Don't have Alzheimer's disease yet that I can remember because I'm very, very consciously being very intense with my supplement program. I do far more. I probably do, like I say, 300% more than I really need to do, but my energy requirement, my stamina requirement is so high because of my 300 presentations a year that I'd rather give myself more. I want to err on the side of excess as opposed to underdosing myself under these extreme physical and energy requirement pressures. And it pays off, absolutely pays off. People marvel at my stamina and energy at my age, but then they're not prepared to supplement as heavily as I am. If they're prepared to supplement as heavily as I do, they'll have the same stamina and same energy as I do.
Well, you talk about wanting to take enough that you know you've got an excess. Are there any risks with taking an excess of minerals and trace minerals, vitamins?
Well, if there was, Blake, I'd be long dead. When people ask that question, it's a very legitimate question. When people ask that question, can you overdose, is really what you're asking when you take excess over and above the RDAs, recommended daily allowance, and so forth, or the labels. When you're talking about nutrients, true nutrients, vitamins and minerals and trace minerals, amino acids, essential fatty acids, the answer is it's very difficult to do that. When you're talking about herbs, you might be able to overdose on herbs, especially some that might have effects on your cardiovascular system, like ephedra and caffeine. Those are both phytochemicals extracted from herbs or plants. You take too much of those. There's all kinds of herbs that are used as medicinal herbs. You can take too much of those and kill yourself because they have effects on the heart and the lungs, the brain, the central nervous system. So you have to really follow the directions very carefully when you're dealing with herbs. But when it comes to vitamins and minerals and trace minerals and rare earths, essential fatty acids, amino acids, it's very difficult to overdose. If you think about it, doctors kill 150,000 to 300,000 Americans each year in hospitals alone. They physically injure 1.3 million each year. They infect 2 million, 103,000 of whom die each year, despite heroic efforts to save them. 140,000 Americans die each year in hospitals as a result of what's called polypharmacy, where they take 2, 5, 6, 8, 10, 12, 20 different drugs in the hospital and they form a fatal cocktail. You add all these together, that's 4 million casualties a year, killed, injured, and infected. And nobody seems to worry too much about that. Yet there's been nobody damaged or killed or infected by too many vitamins and minerals or amino acids or fatty acids, and yet everybody's always concerned about overdosing. And so, kind of like golf, you want a low score, right? And so when it comes to the injury and death score, when you look at doctors, it's way up there. They're 100 out of 100. When it comes to vitamins and minerals and trace minerals, it's 0. And so, I mean, if you could have a golf card, scorecard, where your score was 0, and you got the ball in every hole, I mean, wouldn't that be great? You'd be going for the 0 score, even though it'd be like hole-in-ones. On 18, your score would be 18. The lowest score you could get on an 18-hole golf course. 18. Wouldn't that be great to have a score of 18?
That'd be great.
Everybody else has 70, 80, and yours was always consistently 18.
I think it also helps that when you take vitamins and minerals and trace minerals, that you take a balance, and you're not just supplementing with just one nutrient. You get a variety of nutrients. Isn't that right?
Well, again, Blake, the advantage I have when it comes to nutrition is I have a degree in agriculture. My major was in animal husbandry and nutrition. Our whole focus was learning on how to formulate diets for different species of animals. And we put things in their diet so we can prevent as many as 900 different diseases. We can reverse and cure as many as 900 different diseases. We learned how to put everything in one little alfalfa pellet. And so very few people know as much about formulating nutrients into supplement programs as an ag student or a veterinary student. And so I was really blessed with that background. And I don't like single nutrients because if you're deficient in something else, when you drive a system by putting a lot of one nutrient in, like taking a lot of vitamin C and nothing else, or taking a lot of vitamin A and nothing else, or taking a lot of vitamin E and nothing else, taking a lot of calcium and nothing else, you're going to accentuate the deficiencies. The deficiencies will actually get worse. You can get actually a life-threatening problem. So when you look at the programs from American Longevity, you'll see that we rarely sell single nutrient. I don't think we have a single nutrient product. Everything we have available may be featuring one nutrient, but it has all the supporting cofactors necessary for that to work efficiently. And I don't like people to take a single nutrient. We always have complete programs that offer all the essential nutrients. That way we're never getting into that bear trap where we're giving high doses of certain nutrients and causing more problems in another direction. So we always like to give everything, although we may stress one or two nutrients because of a particular disease or health challenge, but we're giving everything, and that prevents this whiplash or a whipsaw effect of causing deficient areas to become worse.
Now, I know over the years you've worked with some very famous world-class athletes. Can you share any stories of the people you've worked with? I don't know if you can share any of the names.
Very difficult to share names because of they'll be knocking on my door and wanting $1 million for sharing their name. But I can tell you we do have world-class athletes in boxing. We do have world-class athletes in baseball, professional baseball, football, basketball. And some of these guys, I mean, they're 300-pound, all-muscle, 7-foot-tall basketball players. These are first string. We're talking about all-star level athletes. And some of them are in their 30s, and they play more than the younger players who are in their 20s because the players in their 20s who are not taking these programs and supplements don't have the stamina. They don't have the ability to maintain their strength and stamina under the pressure of professional level sports. Well, the ones that we work with do, in fact, show enormous benefit when it comes to stamina, injury resistance, injury recover, workout recovery time is just wonderful, and they recognize the benefit right away. Many of these are record holders. They are the tops when it comes to certain statistics in their field, and that's the way it's always going to be. You'll find that the top ones will use our products, and the ones who are sort of at the low end of the scale, they're out there drinking the soft drinks and don't pay too much attention, and that's why they're at the low end of the scale.
I think a couple of names that we can talk about, there are a couple of people from Germany that are now going on a trek, going for the world record in the longest walking trek ever. Thomas Stenzel and Jorgen Berger, and you've been working with them now for about a month. What kind of results have they seen?
Well, this is pretty typical of what you will see with high scoring athletes. These guys, in a month's time, their typical walking was somewhere around 400 miles. And after a month of being on complete nutritional programs plus our complete sweat replacer, they made it to 600 miles. I mean, it was like a 50% increase in output, and they feel great. In fact, one of them has a couple of screws in his ankle and had some obvious surgery done on his ankle for ankle injuries. And he was told he'd never be able to participate in any real rugged athletic events, and here he's going to walk 35,000 miles or whatever it is, some wild figure in distance, showing the doctors that no matter how bad the injury was in the ankle, that by supplementing properly, you can rebuild that ankle and go on and really do some intense exercise and not only pull it off, but do it in record-setting times and distances.
Thank you, Dr. Wallach. Let's shift gears for a minute and go back. I want to talk a little bit about women again. Now, without any infidelity, I've heard you say that you've got more women pregnant than any man ever alive. Can you explain what you mean with that?
Yeah, that's what I say. Like when women will call me up on the radio program and say, I have this infertility problem, and I'll say, well, this is your lucky day because I've gotten more women pregnant than any other man in history. And my wife she's the one who jumps in and says, well, he does that with nutrition, right? She's very quick to say that. And that's because, again, in veterinary medicine and agriculture, when you're paying for the food for a cow, you want that cow to get pregnant. You want her to have a normal pregnancy without the need for medical intervention or veterinary intervention. You want to have 100% of those calves born normal without birth defects. They have to be strong enough to get up and drink milk within a few moments after they're born and get on with their life. We don't have the ability to have incubators for calves and lambs and have an intense pediatric intensive care unit and all this stuff. It's just not economically, you can't do it. It's not viable. And so we give cow everything she's supposed to have to get through pregnancy in great shape and take care of that calf, and the calf's going to be born in great shape and grow and feed itself the way it's supposed to. And we need to do the same thing with human beings. We do this very simply because of economic reasons, and if we were to do the same thing in human beings, again, we'd save ourselves an enormous amount of unnecessary misery, an enormous amount of unnecessary expenditures, add many, many healthful years to people's lives. And it just comes down to being very, very dedicated to supplementing properly from the very beginning.
Well, in addition to the 90 essential nutrients, I've heard some people, especially women, that have talked about progesterone levels. Is there a need for any kind of supplementation with progesterone?
Well, when you're talking about supplement hormones, Blake, you're talking about PMS and menopause in women. It's been a real bugaboo, one of my favorite subjects to talk about because doctors have injured women so badly when it came to HRT, hormone replacement therapy. Women need some help when they have problems with PMS, premenstrual syndrome. They will often show breast tenderness and pelvic and abdominal cramping, back aches, emotional jags, crying jags, irritability, and inability to focus and so forth. Sometimes you get downright mean, and it's time to take a vacation, right? Guys will usually run down to the store and stay away for a couple of days because of women who get this raging PMS thing. And really it has to do with deficiencies of raw materials. According to the University of California, San Diego, 85% of the symptoms of PMS are due to a calcium deficiency. 85%. By just supplementing with high-quality calcium, you can actually get rid of 85% of the symptoms of PMS. And then the other 15% has to do with prostaglandin deficiencies, and we know the raw material for prostaglandin deficiencies are the essential fatty acids. Now, prostaglandins are raw materials to help make hormones, including progesterone, including estrogen. And so, of course, you get girls going through puberty and young adult women. If they're not supplementing properly or not eating properly, they have all these hormonal problems, which result in all these clinical things, behavioral problems, physical problems. They go to doctors who put them on hormones without backing it up with all the nutritional supplements, and they really get into trouble. We have a program for girls and young women and women who are still cycling for PMS, and that includes a phytoprogesterone from wild Mexican yam, one of the highest quality phytoprogesterones, or plant progesterones that come from plants. It's been used for literally hundreds of years, maybe 1,000 years. Has been used in China and Mexico. It's just a very well experienced, I guess I can say, herb. It's phytoprogesterone from wild Mexican yam. Lots of writings about it, lots of research on it, very safe. And it's part of our programs that we use for women with PMS. Also, women who are going through menopause have a different set of problems. They immediately stop all production of progesterone, because progesterone is produced by the corpus luteum, which is a little blood clot that forms in the follicle after the egg is ovulated. And as soon as they stop ovulating, there's no more progesterone. So most of the symptoms of menopause that are attributed to estrogen deficiencies are really progesterone deficiencies. And estrogen is actually manufactured by the liver when women are going through menopause. They'll actually produce as much or more estrogen during menopause as they did before menopause. So it's not a estrogen problem. It's really a progesterone problem. We like to make sure they're getting their precursors and actual phytoprogesterones from the wild Mexican yam. And there's a 100-year-old herbal program called Lydia Pinkham's. And she used all kinds of herbs and extracts from vegetables in there. And we like to use a variation on Lydia Pinkham's that has these things in there, including herbs that actually get rid of hot flashes and night sweats. Just a recent research project showed very clearly the only thing that will stop hot flashes and night sweats are estrogen and these herbs. Now, we don't like estrogen because it increases the risk of a woman's cancer for breast, uterine, ovarian cancer by as much as 78%. And so we'd rather not have them take estrogen, pharmaceutical estrogen. We like the soy isoflavones. The Chinese and the Japanese women have a significant lower risk of breast cancer than American women. First of all, they don't get supplemented with outside estrogen, but they do eat a lot of tofu and other soy products, so they're getting, just in their cultural eating habits, they get a lot of soy isoflavones as estrogen, phytoestrogen sources. They do extremely well. So this is part of our program for women going through menopause. It works. They're so grateful because we're able to wean off their estrogen and take our herbal programs along with the nutrient programs. They're actually able to control hot flashes and night sweats without estrogen.
You talk about soy as being a phytoestrogen. Now, does that carry any risk of increasing someone's estrogen dominance?
Well, again, the reason why women tend to be estrogen dominant, Blake, is because they're not making enough progesterone. And if you give them all the raw materials to make enough progesterone, or you give them some support with the phytoprogesterone through the wild Mexican yam, you can actually reverse this estrogen dominant problem that many women have. And they really get into this estrogen dominant problem when they go through menopause, and it kind of freaks out doctors. They can't figure out how a woman can be estrogen dominant when they're going through menopause, and that's because their liver will actually make an enormous amount of estrogen, but they totally stop making progesterone when they stop ovulating. And so estrogen dominance can actually be dealt with very effectively by supplementing with phytoprogesterones from the wild Mexican yam. And again, I like the old herbal combinations that have these herbs in them that will actually get rid of hot flashes and night sweats. I mean, they're really successful. Even women who've been thrown into surgical menopause and when they're younger years, they've had their ovaries removed, get them on this little program we have, their hot flashes and night sweats go away, usually within a week or 10 days. Actually, it works like a charm. And so for women who have PMS, perimenopause, menopause, or postmenopausal problems, these little programs, both the nutritional programs and the herbal support, with the phytoprogesterone, phytoestrogen, adequate, more than adequate amounts of the essential fatty acids so you can make the proper prostaglandins, and get rid of the hot flashes and night sweats using these herbs. I mean, it doesn't get any better than this. It's safe. There's no risk of breast, uterine, and ovarian cancer like there is with estrogen and estrogen-progesterone combinations.
All right, Dr. Wallach, a couple of final questions. The 90 essential nutrients, don't they hold benefit not just for the embryo and the baby while the mother's expecting, but I've heard you talk about them in relation with some health challenges that a lot of women face while they're expecting, be those anything from piking and cribbing where they like the pickles and ice cream to, the low back pain where the preeclampsia, I think it's called. Can you spend a few minutes and just tell us a little bit about that?
The pregnant woman requires a lot more nutrition than a woman who's not pregnant, because not only is she growing in size and getting ready to produce milk, but the baby is growing, and the baby gets its nutrition from the mother's reserves or stored nutrients. And there's a lot of diseases of pregnancy that occur because the mother is simply deficient in nutrients. And these include dental problems. So they get periodontal disease because they're getting osteoporosis of the face and jaw. And you'll hear the old-time days, they'd say a woman will lose one tooth per pregnancy because they get osteoporosis of the face and jaw as the baby pulls calcium out of them, and maybe she breastfeeds the baby for a year or so. Also, women have what's called the diabetes of pregnancy. As the baby pulls the chromium and vanadium out of the mother, she'll get diabetes during pregnancy because the baby pulled all the nutrients out of her that are required to prevent diabetes. Women can also get osteoporosis and arthritis, chronic low back problems. And these are all structural things that are easily repaired, but why develop them when you can supplement properly during pregnancy with all the known essential nutrients? Also, women get a disease of high blood pressure during pregnancy. It's called preeclampsia or toxemia of pregnancy. This is called milk fever in a cow. In a cow, we just solve this by giving them the nutrients in an IV solution for $2. They jump up and go to work, start eating grass, producing milk, taking care of the calf again. Where a woman, because we have insurance, when they get toxemia of pregnancy, or maybe preeclampsia it's also called, they will be tranquilized and put into a hospital for bed rest for maybe as long as a month or two at $1,200 a day in the hospital. Wow. And when it just would simply take just a few pennies a day worth of some nutrients, and it will actually solve the problem much more completely than just giving them tranquilizers and bed rest. Many chronic diseases over time occur in women who've had many pregnancies: lupus, macular degeneration, Alzheimer's disease, heart disease, and these are all, of course, nutritional deficiency diseases that can be avoided as the mother supplements properly. Of course, we both know a little gal by the name of Vivian who has 9 children, and she only weighs, I don't know, she can't weigh 90 pounds, and she's had 9 healthy children. She is very intense about her supplement program. All her children are healthy, and she still has time. I don't know how she does it. She still has time to operate an American longevity business out of her home. And so this is just an example of how if you supplement properly, that even a small person like Vivian can have 9 healthy kids. She breastfeeds them. I mean, she really is a good mother. And yet this is only going to happen if she supplements properly. So she's a great example for a lot of women out there.
Well, so far today we've talked about children, we've talked about mothers and women, we've talked about athletes. Are there any closing comments that you would like to leave us with?
Well, thank you, Blake. I'd just like to remind people that you cannot get all the nutrients you need from your basic 4 food groups. That's been a myth that has killed more Americans than all the wars, muggings, sniper attacks put together in the 220 plus years we've been a nation. You cannot get everything you need from your basic 4 food groups because plants cannot manufacture minerals. Minerals make up 2/3 of the essential nutrients, and not a sheer weight in numbers are important. Secondly, nothing can occur in your body, either biochemical or structural or mechanical, without one or more mineral cofactors. You cannot even use energy or oxygen without one or more mineral cofactors. You cannot utilize DNA, RNA, or chromosomes without mineral cofactors. You cannot utilize vitamins, enzymes, carbohydrates, fats, and proteins without one or more mineral cofactors. You cannot utilize hormones without one or more mineral cofactors. You cannot utilize testosterone, estrogen, progesterone. You cannot utilize adrenal hormones, insulin, thyroid hormones, or pituitary hormones. Nothing in our body works without one or more mineral cofactors, and yet plants cannot manufacture minerals like they do vitamins, amino acids, and fatty acids. And as important as minerals are, plants cannot manufacture them. Plants only can get minerals out of the soil. And unfortunately, nutritional minerals do not occur in a uniform blanket around the crust of the earth. Nutritional minerals occur in veins like chocolate and chocolate ripple ice cream. Minerals occur in veins like gold and silver. Minerals do not occur in a uniform blanket around the crust of the earth. And the only way that we can guarantee we're going to get optimal amounts each day is to supplement properly. And without that, you can look forward to many illnesses, an early death. If you supplement properly, you can look forward to reducing the risk of those diseases to almost zero, and you're going to add 20, 30, 40, 50 healthy years to your life.
Thank you very much, Dr. Wallach. We appreciate you being here today.
Well, you're very, very